Hello and welcome to the Analog Toys live stream. And I'm joined by my very good friend, Michael French of RetroBlasting. How are you, Michael?
Hi. I don't know if we'll stay friends for long in a conversation like this. Let us see.
I like to test those waters. It's good. It's always good to know. It's good to know. You know, I was trying to pick out a T-shirt for this show. You know, I keep like all my pop culture T-shirts here in the studio, so I can pick and choose for whatever video. And I was going through, and I came across this Skeletor one, and I actually wore this at some point at Joe Fest and then washed and dried it at your house. And I was like, it smells like Retro Blasting HQ. I'm going to wear this. And that is a good smell, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. I too had to pick out a shirt, and I thought, how can I talk about nostalgia in the way that I expect this conversation to go while also subverting nostalgia? And I thought, oh, I know. So yeah, awesome.
I think that T-shirt is suitable for any video or live stream. But there we
I agree. I agree.
So look, let's not stand on ceremony here, Mr. French. Let's get right into this conversation. We can chat afterwards.
Right.
Someone called Laser Pants sent me a super. He said, "Here's your bloody super chat." Thank you, Michael Schaefer, for bringing that up. I did not intend to read that chat, but thank you, Ryan.
Well, I mean, what that indicates to me, given that we know that Laser Pants is American, is that he needs to get more fiber in his diet. I think that's really the way we need to take that super chat in the spirit that it's given. So,
yeah, when I first met him late at night at the hotel when we were checking in, and the first place he took me to food was IHOP. I was like, "Thank you for that, Ryan. You don't like me very much."
definite fiber deficiency going on there. If that is the regular cuisine, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, not exactly nostalgia as a topic, but nostalgia and the impact that it's having on the current pop culture landscape, I feel is something that has really been on both our minds very much lately.
Yes.
You've just put out an excellent video about, Action Force 2. It even had nostalgia in the title. I am somewhat jealous of your mastery of the English language and the way you can
wait a second. You are genetically directly connected to the OG English lineage. Like you are like I am English speaking if you bought it on Wish by definition. I'm American, like whatever. No, but seriously, yeah, nostalgia, Tony, has definitely been an increasing, I don't want to say concern of mine, because I like nostalgia. I like talking about this stuff. That's why our channels got started, was we like exploring this stuff. We like analyzing it. We like looking back on it. And I think that's totally fine. But there seems to be an increasing number of people who want to live in this kind of Truman Show type thing where
a nostalgia bubble. Yeah.
I don't know what that, I don't know why that's continuing to, well, I guess I do know why it's continuing to escalate a little bit, because we're living through this era of existential human crises globally. So everything's really scary, and our generation is in that midlife crisis stage anyway. For the most part, we're in our early 40s to early 50s kind of thing.
Yep.
So maybe I'm answering my own question. Good night, everyone. We figured it out. Bye.
Well, look, so let's just establish some stuff here, because the topic of nostalgia really came up for me when I was trying to develop the script for my Punisher video as well, because I'm talking about a character that I liked at a very particular time within the world, but also a particular time within my life. And I look back now, and there's a lot of aspects of the Punisher character that I'm very uncomfortable with now. But also, I believe both of us have been getting social media comments, YouTube comments, where some people are sort of saying, if there's no nostalgia, then what's the point? And I find that to be a very selfish perspective.
Right.
Because if if our parents' generation felt the same way, so when they become parents, and you and I, we're only a year apart, born in the late 70s, but kind of grew up as 80s kids.
Right.
If my dad was, if there's no nostalgia, what's the point? And fortunately, social media wasn't around back in those days, so people like my dad couldn't go online and
right.
Complain about the fact that there were no more Zulus in movies and there were no more cowboys and all of this kind of thing. We never would have got Star Wars and Masters of the Universe and we didn't get a reboot of G.I. Joe. We got a top to bottom full overhaul.
Yes.
It's like barely the chassis was still there, and it was everything else, new engine, new bodywork, the whole lot.
Right.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's definitely what I was getting at in my recent video with Action Force and talking about G.I. Joe, was that, and a lot of people seem to have missed the point of that, not surprising, which is that we liked the stuff we liked as kids because it was new. And kids today like Fortnite and Roblox because it's new. They liked Minecraft because it was new. Like even a few years prior to this, they liked Pokemon because to them it was new. Like it was this new thing, right? There's nothing wrong with nostalgia when it's in its place and moderated, just as much as there's nothing wrong with things that are new. But there is this now addiction, like you said, with the person, I almost said gentleman, with the person who said, if there's no nostalgia, then what's the point? And that to me signifies somebody who is the canary in the coal mine for, we have tipped over the edge in this industry on nostalgia. Like it is now considered this lifeblood thing. And it's like, but again, nostalgia has no fuel behind it. It only has memory. And I don't care how a few years ago, somebody asked me, this was early on when my channel started, somebody sent me a message and they were talking about how they liked my videos and stuff, but they wanted to ask me a serious question about how to parent their kids in regards to the stuff they liked. And I said, well, first of all, I'm never comfortable giving people advice on their kids. I said, but you asked. I was like, you asked, so we can have a little bit of a conversation here. I said, because his point was, I really want to get my kids interested in the stuff I was interested in when I was young. I want to get them interested in Transformers and Ghostbusters and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but, and I said, and you've given me permission to answer this question, even though I'm not comfortable doing it. I said, so remember, you asked. Our parents, unless you had one of those really obnoxious dads, and every group of friends knew that one friend who had the dad that like wouldn't stop making him like he's like, no, I can't come over on Friday night because my dad sits down and we have John Wayne time. You know, there's always that, like, there was that one kid, but everybody else was like, huh? I told him, I said, all this stuff was new to you. And your parents didn't force you to watch any of it. And there was a bevy of choices. And you picked those. So, like, you had Centurions on TV and Silverhawks and Thundercats and Wheeled Warriors and this and that and all this other stuff and Bionic 6, and at least the animation was great, and you had all this stuff, right? And it was all there, and you got to pick which ones you thought were cool. But nobody was turning the screws on you. You got to choose. That's why it's special to you. Because, like, for example, like me right now, like growing up, my dad's John Wayne thing was the Boy Scouts. That was like the thing he tried to force me to do. And he doesn't understand now why I'm not into the Boy Scouts as an adult. Like, I'm not an adult volunteer or anything like that. I don't care. And it's like, well, Dad, it wasn't my thing. It was your thing. That was your thing. You made me do it while I was still unable to make my own decisions legally. And then as soon as I was out, I was out. And I told the guy, I said, you better be careful. I said, because that could happen with your kid with your interests. If you let him find Ghostbusters on his own or Transformers or whatever, you know, I went and found Errol Flynn's Robin Hood on my own as a child, and I liked that, and I still do. But you can't force this stuff. And I think that's my concern, is that I think I talked about it in another video where it's a desperate attempt to stay young by keeping all your interests relevant in a modern world. But it's like, this stuff ain't modern. You're going to tell me that Native American dudes with pet eagles and ninjas and stuff in a military story, like, that was cool in the 80s. It's not, and it's cool to look back on and go, oh, wasn't that charming? Like, I loved that stuff. But like now, I'm not even referring to politically correct or anything like that. I'm referring to the trappings of the 80s. Like, ninjas were a fad in the 80s. Like, they were. So yeah. Anyway,
it started with Kung Fu in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had the 70s Kung Fu craze, which then became the ninja craze. In the modern day, I look back now and I'm like, that stuff is silly. I love, you know, you've got a thing for Ninja 3: The Domination.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a real thing for the first American ninja movie, and particularly Revenge of the Ninja. I think is the best ninja movie of the 80s. That's just my personal opinion.
Right.
But I watched it recently, within the last 12 months, I sat down and watched Sho Kosugi in Revenge of the Ninja.
Yeah.
That's some stupid stuff.
Yes. Yes. It is charming to revisit. It's fun to have it in your movie library. But I hope, and this is what I've run into, a lot of people our age, they expect their kids to sit down in front of that stuff and have the same reactions they did in 1982, 83. And I'm going, what planet are you living on? Like, I know there's that whole thing about, kids these days and all that stuff. I don't resent kids for having their own new interests, because I was allowed to have my own new interests. I don't resent them having their own music that they listen to on Spotify, you know, which was once the radio. They have their own music and bands and artists and stuff, just like we did, just like our parents did. I mean, my parents' parents rolled their eyes at my dad listening to Elvis and the Beatles. Well, guess what? Then my dad rolled his eyes when I was listening to Kylie Minogue and KLF and stuff. And then, you know, now we roll our eyes at kids who are listening to Cardi B and everything. And it's like, you know, mileage may vary, but that's just the way the world works. That's the way the wheel turns. And some people seem to be trying to keep the wheel from turning. And I you know,
that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So look, we've got a couple of super chats to get to, but just before we do, I'm gonna ask you a question, and then you can have a little bit of time to think about it while I'm reading the super chats, and then you can give your answer, and I'm going to answer the same question. So both of us are, you know, very passionate vintage toy collectors. You know, I'm kind of 70s, 80s, and also some of the 60s. You're very much 80s, 90s. We have some crossover, but then there are other things, you know, I collect a lot of and you don't touch. It's a good broad spectrum there.
Yeah.
These are somewhat nostalgic properties, but some of the stuff I collect, I don't have any nostalgic connection to, because I appreciate it now as a toy. I didn't have it back in the day. So my question to you is your enthusiasm for these properties that you collect, you know, and watch the movies and cartoons and all of that, is it all fueled by nostalgia, or is there something else going on with you? So take a moment to think about that, and I'm going to run through a number of super chats.
Sure.
So Jim Largo, thank you very much. He said, it's great to see you all together again. Great videos, both of you, this week. Yeah, Tim Ward just mentioned in the chat before, he was like, we both did a video about Valaverse. I mean, my video is about Classified Sergeant Slaughter, but it became... According to the comments, oh my God, I just watched an Action Force advert. I was like, yes, you did. Now go buy something.
Well, I was accused of being a shill in mine from one or two people. And I'm like, I've never shilled for anybody. And I certainly have never pandered for subs either. I'm like, so guess what, buddy? Like, bye. Like, if I was shilling, would I really have called Tim Kennedy's alternate head a psycho Luigi in a Western saloon? No, I would have been, whatever. That's why Bobby and Valaverse are so cool, and I'm not shilling for them. He's a normal guy that doesn't like put that corporate speak on everything and be like, all right, so here's our communications deal. I want you. Bobby didn't ask me to run that video by him at all. He didn't check anything. It was not an ad.
I remember in the private chat, you shared some of the early part of the script, and then Bobby came up and he went, I don't want to read it. I want to experience the video when it's done. So he didn't. You offered some early insight.
Yeah. And I wasn't even sending it to all of you guys to get approval. I was sending it to say, hey, check out the direction that I'm taking this in. Which,
Chazilla, thank you very much for the super chat. It says, Michael, please do the Skeletor voice. If I can feed you a line, Michael, if you wouldn't mind. You're not a dancing monkey. You can refuse.
Okay, sure.
Has nostalgia cancelled the future?
Do you want me to say that as Skeletor, or do you want me to answer it as Skeletor?
Say that as Skeletor.
I've looked into my crystal, and I wonder, has nostalgia cancelled the future?
Expertly done, sir.
Thank you.
Jeremy Jernigan, good to see you, mate, and thank you for the super chat. He says, really looking forward to this discussion, gents. Couldn't have picked two better people to dissect the topic. Not wanting to yank our own chains or anything, I was only ever going to do this discussion with Michael because so much of our channels, our collections, it's all based around nostalgic properties, but I don't view a lot of this with rose-tinted glasses on, and I know that Michael doesn't either. So, and as you already alluded to earlier in this chat, Michael, that some people really didn't quite get everything that you were saying in your Action Force video.
No.
So over the next 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it's going to be, I really want to dive into that and really clarify what it is that we mean and where we're both coming from. So Carl N, thank you for the an Australian. He's got a kangaroo there. Excellent. So nostalgia is used by risk-averse marketers. Gen X is the first generation to have easy access to cultural artifacts of their youth. This started with home video.
Yes.
I don't know if we're the first generation. Like, my dad's a toy collector. He collects the die-cast metal soldiers he had. He's got an extensive physical media collection. You would really appreciate it, Michael, because all of his stuff is like, he's got every single thing ever made or even discussed about the Zulu War, not just films, documentaries, books, all of it. Really, really impressive collection. But Carlin, I do get your point, and thank you for the super chat. Jim Largo, thank you. He says Valaverse has found the sweet spot between nostalgia and innovation. Great nods to the past with exciting new characters and stories. And Bobby even mentioned on the last 3 POA that currently he feels as though Valaverse is not competing with G.I. Joe Classifieds. They actually have two unique places in the market. It's those of us who want to experience something new. It's Valaverse Action Force. And those of us who, if there's no nostalgia, what's the point? Then go with G.I. Joe Classifieds. But remember, G.I. Joe Classifieds didn't start that way. They didn't start with nostalgia out of the gate. So.
Right. Yeah, G.I. Joe Classifieds, that's what I tried to get across in my video, is that they weren't going for nostalgia with Wave 1. They were trying this half-hearted, weird layup hybrid thing where they were like, we're gonna lean on these characters because corporations at their size have no creativity anymore. We got to go with these characters because to us, this is G.I. Joe. We don't even know about Adventure Team, Kung Fu Grip, the original 60s Joes. It's not even in our radar, on our radar. But we got to try and make it new. So we're going to pander to what we think all these new visual conceits are. So it's not nostalgia, and it's really a pathetic pandery attempt at kids because they don't understand the youth market either. So it's neither. So that was my point, was that it's not that the nostalgia characters that they're leaning into now with Classifieds are a bad thing. It's that we need to admit to ourselves that was never the real intent of Classifieds, because they've used them to market the Snake Eyes movie, which bombed. They've used the Classifieds brand to try and get G.I. Joe into Fortnite, which we all predicted was why they did Wave 1 the way they did to begin with. The whole thing is this kind of like, there's like they have a blindfold on and they're grasping in the dark, hoping that they can find something to grab onto. And it's obvious.
Yeah. Keith Knight, thank you for the super chat. It says, hello, chaps. As kids, we never used to harp on about nostalgia at all. Oh, those were the days, eh? No, but you're right, Keith. You're absolutely right. The vast majority of the pop culture franchises that I got invested in throughout my childhood were new things. So, John Stinsman, thank you for the super chat. It says, my father didn't get me into anything, but he watched Star Trek, $6 Million Man, and took me to see Star Wars, all because he was interested in seeing it. I absorbed it organically and by osmosis.
Yes. My mom watched Errol Flynn's Robin Hood and Tyrone Power's Mark of Zorro without trying to force me to watch it. So it was on and I could either, but she also watched Dirty Dancing a lot and I never gave a shit about that movie. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like she didn't force me to watch that either. So,
Yeah. Brendan Haley, thank you. He says, a little love from Her Majesty's Constabulary, a gift for remaining honest and a lack of shillery. Thank you, Brendan. I hope you're doing well, my man. How's the weather in Queensland? And Timothy Hans, thank you for the super chat. He says, for the Skeletor voice, it was perfect.
Welcome.
I believe we are caught up.
Okay.
Super chat. Yep. All right. So back to the question.
Mm-hmm.
Is your passion for these franchises, is it completely fueled by nostalgia or is there something else going on? As you are now as a very handsome 38-year-old man.
Oh gosh, if only. In both directions. I have two answers to this. They're not opposing, but they're kind of supplementary. In the one sense, my memory is for that time period is very tight, but not in a nostalgic way. Like I don't remember. I don't just remember feelings. A lot of people just remember how they felt, the smell of their grandmother's biscuits at Christmas and stuff like that. When they were opening. And that's what they based their whole thing around. And again, I get it. I'm an outlier. Like I get it. I'm always going to be an outlier. But my memories for some of that stuff is so tight that I remember things like, why do all the Return of the Jedi figures come with sticks? I need more guns. Why does this Thundercats line stink so hard? Like, why do these Silverhawks figures, why do they not have any play value? Like, why did I buy this action figure? Like, so all of that stuff is wrapped into very tight details in my brain. I can't remember where I put, my box cutter from yesterday, but I can remember all that stuff. Right. So, I have a box cutter because I get a lot of toys in the mail, guys. It's not because I'm a violent person. Anyway, so because of that, the first thing I would say is that the reason that I look back on a lot of stuff and then that spurred me to make a YouTube channel. Yes, it's thoughts from the past, but it's not like awe from the past. It's not, it's forensic. It's like, let's twist this Rubik's Cube together. Let's see what this is all about. And so that's part of it. And then the other part of it, which is supplemental to the first, is I have this personality that not overthinks, but analyzes things. I like to explore ideas. I like to explore concepts. I like to look at things at different levels and figure out, is there a cultural subtext here? Is there a pattern here? Is there a trend? Is it this and that? And I don't mean to imply that I'm like that guy from A Beautiful Mind that's like, ooh, there's a pattern. Pigeons are walking, like, I don't mean it like that, but
real quick. So when you get YouTube comments, when you've analyzed whatever, the topic is, and you've made a somewhat critical video, do you get those YouTube comments? I'm sure you do. I get them. People go, I'm really sorry this upset you so much. And you're like, this didn't upset me. I really enjoyed the process of analyzing and going down this rabbit hole. And
and it's because they're fueled by emotions all the time. I think there has to be a balance. I'm not a Vulcan. I think emotions are important in their place, but they can also be a hindrance. They can be a crippling thing in the wrong place, right? So when I look at something, you know, and I watched Karate Commando's 5 episodes, and I see these wacky animation or story errors, and I'm on camera going, he's right there in the bush to the left. He's right there. Just look left. There are people who are so plugged into only their emotions and the emotions of others, and not the intellectual exercise, that they see me or you and they go, he's so angry right now. Why are you such a hater? And it's like, I'm actually just having fun with this. Like I'm not. I didn't go to bed. I didn't go to bed that night after I filmed that going, why didn't they look left? Why didn't they look left? Oh my God. You know, Chuck Norris is so broken. I didn't think about it after I did the video. And maybe that's another reason that they could have a problem, is because maybe they think about this all the time, curled up with it like a teddy bear. You know, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, yes. So I really wanted to answer this question as well, because for me, there was a time in my life when I first started getting into toy collecting was I was 16 years old. You know, I didn't take much of a, and even when I took a break, I was still like playing Hero Quest, so I was still doing these pop culture things. And I went to a collector show with my dad. I've told this story before, where he was collecting die-cast metal soldiers from the 50s and 60s, and a guy, one of the tables had a really large like milk crate under the table, half full of $6 Million Man stuff and half full of Action Man stuff. And I can remember the feelings of nostalgia that I had at the time. And then probably up until my mid-20s, you know, when I would acquire a new toy, it would spark this feeling. You know, it would remind me of emotional things from my childhood, feelings and smells. Now, as a 45-year-old man, I don't remember what any of those feelings actually feel like. I did do a lot of illicit drugs in my early 20s. That maybe that's part of it. Maybe part of it is spending 10 years fighting the worldwide war on terror. It's changed my perspective. So I think very little of what I do now with this channel and my collecting is actually based on nostalgia. But I am still invested in good characters and good stories. But I appreciate the time and place in which they were created. That was my big struggle with that whole Punisher script. You know, to me, it doesn't translate to the modern day, the same as Sailors with Talking Parrots doesn't translate. And I think ninjas are. I was a ninja crazy kid. I loved ninjas in the 80s. I wanted to be a ninja. It's the stupidest shit ever now.
Oh, sure. It's a look back time capsule kind of thing. It's not. It's fun to sit there and go, those were the days. But dragging it into the now, like, you know, with all the stuff we know now and everything, you know, like the other, you know, you brought up a good point that sparked something in me. I've run into two types of people who seem to lean on the emotional nostalgia card in these debates, in these kind of discussions on social media about these properties. And they are two extremes. So it's interesting that they're two extremes that they land in the same conclusion. The first group are and again, I'm going to reveal something about myself here, which I'm sure most of you already know. The first group is the group of kids that are now adults that had plenty of friends to play with growing up. And so they just kind of remember getting together with their friends in the backyard or, you know, in the back garden and playing G.I. Joe or playing with their Transformers or whatever. And they just had a rollicking good time. And they're like, oh man, you're taking this stuff too seriously. It was just fun, man. It was just fun, dude. Just remember the fun. Just enjoy it, bro. And it's like, okay, I didn't have the benefit of having a lot of friends growing up. Now, I didn't, though, index on the other side of the spectrum that I found. The other people who seem emotionally tied to this in a different way. So you've got those guys on the one side who, as I've just described, they're like, oh man, don't think about it too much. It's just fun, man. Just remember the good old days. Like, this stuff was awesome. It's awesome. And then they do like soy face and like, oh, you know, in their thumbnails. It's awesome.
I know the people.
Yeah. Then you got the other side of the spectrum, which are the ones who did not have good childhoods. And God bless them, you know, because they didn't. I don't ever want to hear anybody who didn't have a good childhood. That's horrible. And they had, you know, no friends, and they were social outcasts, and they transferred their emotions to these properties. Like, I've actually had people tell me, unironically, this is a quote from somebody, dude, Thundercats saved my life when I was a child. I can objectively tell you the Thundercats did not save your life. Like, but they have put so much emotion into it because of the opposite side of this whole thing. But both camps respond emotionally to nostalgia in what I feel in one respect is a vapid way, and in the other respect is an emotionally unhealthy way. They both, one doesn't think about shit enough, and the other one has forgotten what thinking is, and they've lost all perspective, and they're just in it. Yeah. I was this kid who just kind of, I don't know why, but the fate pulled me through the middle of the gray area. Like, it was, you're not going to have a lot of friends, and they're never going to pick you for the dodgeball team. So this is what you've got, but you've got good parents who love you and stuff, so you're not completely abandoned. So you're going to end up just becoming kind of a sarcastic kid, you know, that's just like whatever, and I don't need. And then you're going to look at all this like an activity book when you get to adulthood. You're going to look at it all and go, huh, there's a lot of stuff here to have some, you know, to screw around with as far as like, you know, videos and humor. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so my childhood, in a way, was I was kind of in the same camp as you, but for different reasons. So I had plenty of friends. You know, I was one of those kids in school who I was not. I'm going to use some American terminology here because I don't know what the British terminology is. But you know, the jocks and the nerds. Right? We didn't call it that in England, but I wasn't a jock, but I was accepted by them because they didn't view me as a nerd. But also, yeah, I somehow kind of went down the middle there. And when I would actually be at school at recess and lunchtime, I would have plenty of friends to play with. When it would come to after school and weekends, I just chose not to because I really enjoyed this little world that I had on my bedroom floor with my Action Force figures and my Action Man figures. And I suppose I was just a private person when I was a child. And yeah, but it wasn't, I had a wonderful childhood, great parents. You know, my life didn't start going weird until kind of my teens. I had a wonderful, I lived in England till I was 11 and absolutely wonderful, great family, great grandparents, parents, all of that stuff. So the toys were never an emotional crutch. It was just my thing.
Right.
You know, my dad's thing was football. He loved soccer. But I feel fortunate that he never tried to force that on me. Kind of part of that. I do regret part of that because he's a good football player and I'm a terrible football player. It's because he never forced it on me when I was a kid. But yeah. I think we got a whole bunch more super chats again.
Okay, sure.
Jim Largo, thank you. He says, Grindhead Jim often refers to the exorbitant prices of retro-styled toys or the scalpers on Evil Bay as symptoms of the nostalgia tax, having our love of yesteryear exploited. And I would say that's exactly what Hasbro have just done with the price of their Sergeant Slaughter action figure. Master Son 42, thank you. He says, Michael, I was your friend when you were a kid. We just did not know it yet.
That is true. That is true. Master Son definitely was my friend as a kid.
Yeah. Master Son, I miss you, man.
I do too.
Jeremy Jernigan, thank you. He says hashtag Soylent Grin.
Jeremy, I was just going to say that I think Jeremy, I think he knows a lot more about pure nostalgic intentions than any of us, because nostalgia. No, that's not right either. There's no way that you would like Dragonheart toys because of nostalgia. There's no way you would look back on those and like them because of warm. No, Jeremy, you just must be delightfully broken. Is what I. You got a little bit of a tweak up here, and then it's like, oh, that's his Dragonheart fix. Yeah.
I love that terminology you just there. Delightfully broken.
Yeah.
I wanted to say brilliantly weird.
But that's why he's able to make the games and work on the figure lines that he does, because he's so, he's trig up there, as they say.
Articulated Chad, thank you very much. He says, for that fifth roadblock everyone needs, this topic definitely needs to be discussed more regularly. Well, Articulated Chad, we've got a lot more to go. I always like to be prepared for my live streams. It is very, very rare that I type out 3 pages of notes, because so often Michael will put out a video or I'll put out a video where we're trying to say, well, we know what we're trying to say, but far too many people in the audience hear the words and don't listen.
Right.
And I didn't want to get to the end of this live stream and then sit there later on today or tomorrow going, oh, why didn't I bring that up? So I've got a whole bunch of notes here. So I'm looking back at the era that you and I grew up in. So as I said, we were both born in the late 70s, but, we started, 3 or 4 years age. For me, I was 3 in 1980, or turning 4 in 1980. Throughout that decade, Star Wars was brand new, nothing like it before. Indiana Jones was couched in old serial adventure type things, but the character was entirely, Temple of Doom is a remake of Gunga Din, is it?
It's a sequel to Gunga Din, an unspoken sequel. Yeah.
But it was a totally new and exciting and a very engaging character. Masters of the Universe was completely, it was wacky. It was so much fun. It took sci-fi. It took sword and sorcery, which I was really into back, sorry, Bobby Valor, but I think Hawk the Slayer is better than Conan the Destroyer. But, okay, Back to the Future didn't have toys, but we're not just talking about toy properties here, but Back to the Future, brand new. Time travel is not a new idea, but the way they couched that genre with that story was brilliantly done. Mask, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In the last 20 years, Michael, so we'll say 22 years, since the year 2000, how many new franchises have come around that have had cross-generational appeal? So I'm thinking the first one that pops into my head is Harry Potter. That might have been more than 20 years ago. I'm not exactly sure, but Harry Potter was a good example. And beyond that, I'm kind of struggling.
Well, yeah, I guess we can say that Lord of the Rings had a renaissance around that time.
I will accept Lord of the Rings because we had never seen it in that fashion before.
Right.
And because it was so well done, it brought in a new generation of fans.
Right.
And actually, I would say the same thing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although these characters, they're 60 years old, a lot of them.
Right.
You could say that's nostalgia baiting, but if it was just nostalgia baiting, why did a whole new generation of kids become enraptured? Because we hadn't seen it in that format before. And in fact, one of the notes I wrote down here was comparing the Marvel Cinematic Universe to G.I. Joe's live action attempts. Marvel Cinematic Universe, incredibly successful.
Right.
The 3 G.I. Joe live action movies, terrible movies, did not succeed.
Yeah.
Because Marvel updated their characters and put them into a modern day setting with a lot of thought, and
Mm-hmm.
they updated the story for the modern day.
Right.
They tried to do that with G.I. Joe. They tried to put it in the modern day, but it wasn't done with the same kind of deft hand and skill. I feel like all three of the G.I. Joe movies feel like real rush jobs to me, whereas Marvel has taken its time. Not every Marvel movie's perfect, and I'm sure some of them were rushed, but there's a big difference going on there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, was there a question in there? No, we're just.
So I was talking about the over the last 20 years of the
that's right, other franchises that may have cropped up in that time period. Everything I'm thinking of is actually just prior to that. So like, Jurassic Park was 93, Power Rangers was 93.
Yeah.
The only things I can think of which are cross-generational are things like Minecraft, where kids and adults both seem to get into it for a time. So a lot of them I think are video game based. There's not a lot there that's cross-generational, that's television based. I mean, I know that. No, I can't think of much.
No.
Yeah.
No, so I personally feel as though maybe not in 2000, but certainly by 2010, and I mean there was a really pivotal. Was it, when did The Force Awakens come out?
2015. Yeah, 15.
2015. That's when everything really, really started to change.
Mm-hmm.
As bad as that movie was, it was a box office success. And all of a sudden, for people like you and I who have like never really gotten out of our interest of toys,
right.
I was collecting vintage toys in the early 90s. I know I've heard you talk about doing the same thing in England in the 90s.
Yep.
We've been in this arena, in this game, whatever you want to call it, for most of our adult lives. In 2015, we had a whole bunch of people who hadn't been in the game since they were 10, now all of a sudden are jumping in. And I think that's why those people bring with them the feels, because we probably expended all our energy on the feels in those first few years of collecting or something.
Right.
Now these people, it's not, I haven't thought about this in so long. It's coming back. So now that, we're the generation with the disposable income, we're watching these movies based on properties from the 80s with companies, whether it be movie franchises or movie studios, toy companies. They're now directing everything at our generation as the ones with the most disposable income. And I don't think they're doing a great job at bringing in a younger generation.
No,
Marvel, I think, has certainly done that. Marvel has done that very well, but Marvel is the exception, not the rule here.
Yeah.
I can't get my son into, not that I'm trying to force him into anything, but I haven't been able to get him into Star Wars.
What's there to get into?
I go back to 2015, The Force Awakens. That was one of the first movies.
I mean,
one of the first movies I ever took him to. But me and him, not so much since Endgame, but prior to Endgame, that was like the father and son thing we would do. We would go and watch any new Marvel release at the cinema together. If I would want to take him to Star Wars, he didn't want to go. We went to The Last Jedi together.
Ugh.
And my son, at the time, he would have been 11 or 12 years old. And halfway through, he asked me if he could leave.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I was like, thank God.
Well, okay, so let's pretend for a moment. And this is going to test all of our imaginations, but let's just pretend for a moment that Last Jedi was a good movie that didn't ruin Luke Skywalker and any of those other characters. Let's just pretend. Let's say he was still an old guy and it was coming off Force Awakens and all that stuff. So let's just put that over here and pretend that's the thing, all right? Wasn't it this big, messed up disaster? But that's not the issue. But put it in the background. There's context. Mandalorian and shows like it, like Boba Fett and all this stuff, they're still making the mistake, even though it's Disney, they're still making the mistake of hanging most of their drama in their shows on things that you have to know about from the past to have impact on you. So like when Luke Skywalker shows up at the end of Mandalorian season 2 or whatever it is, and it's this big reveal. It's this big reveal for people in the audience over the age of 35.
Yep.
It's not necessarily an impactful reveal for anybody who's young and hasn't memorized any of those films, especially if all they know about Luke Skywalker is Last Jedi, because guess what? Those two characters are unrecognizable to one another. You would never connect one to the other. So it's just this dude in a black outfit with a green lightsaber showing up, and you're like, who's that guy? If Ahsoka Tano shows up, these kids still probably won't have any context for that appearance. That's the problem, is that they're hanging all of these dramatic moments on nostalgia bait and not on the story. So what does a kid have to hang on to with some of this stuff? It's like they see dad on the couch going, ooh, and they have the same reaction that we did when our dad was like, Hondo is on, let's watch Hondo. And it's like, I don't want to watch John Wayne and Hondo. I don't want to, you look at it and you go, this has got to be uncool because my dad is freaking out about this right now. Why is my dad crying over that digital human that just showed up on screen?
Mannequin Skywalker.
Mannequin Skywalker. Like, that's my point.
I wrote some notes here about Disney Star Wars because now I know you don't have Disney Plus. You haven't watched The Mandalorian. I don't have a Disney Plus account anymore. I could not get through Obi-Wan. I did watch all of Book of Boba Fett, but when it comes to Disney Star Wars, Rogue One's a bit of an outlier. I kind of like Rogue One. I like parts of Rogue One. There are parts I don't enjoy. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Disney Star Wars content, The Mandalorian, to begin with, I felt was the best Star Wars anything that Disney had done to begin with, because it was a lot of new characters, and I'm going to recreate for the audience and for you, Michael, the moment when I was sat at my laptop watching the final episode of Mandalorian season 2 and Luke Skywalker turned up, right?
Okay.
I watched it. Fortunately, here in Australia, when the episodes go live is around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It's like 4 a.m. where you are. I don't know why Disney launches it at that odd time, but I can normally sit down and watch them. I've just finished work and I can watch them without ever seeing any reaction videos or spoilers on YouTube. I watched that last episode and they're on the bridge of this starship, and then all of a sudden a lone X-Wing starts coming into the ship, and I'm thinking, oh, please no. Please, no. And then you start to see Luke Skywalker. He gets off the X-Wing and he starts going and he's destroying all these droids. Mm-hmm. And I saw that, and I'm going to recreate my reaction. I went, oh, Jesus, fuck. Mm-hmm. That was how I responded. Mm-hmm. A couple of hours later, I'm seeing on YouTube, people are crying. Oh, it got me in the feels. And it's like the feels, your emotions that you can't disconnect from have switched your brain off. Mm-hmm. And if it's all about the feels, that ties straight into what you're saying, Michael, that only works for people our age.
Right.
It doesn't work for my son's 15 going on 16. It doesn't work for him. Right. So it is a very much a game of ever diminishing returns to continually pursue the nostalgia, because my generation, our generation, I should say, has grown up with poor diets, bad choices.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's so baffling about this, Tony, is that whether you're talking about the movie industry, the comic book industry, the toy industry, the video game industry, which all of them really have kind of done this. The video game industry has kept something of a balance, more so than the others. But for all those other industries, back in the day, right? It was we as industries are staying in our lane. We're here to entertain kids from ages 4 to 13 or whatever it is. And so these are the products we make. And then somewhere along the way, somewhere in the late 90s, they flipped a switch and they went, you know what we need to do? We need to not worry about staying in this age group. We need to keep up with this certain subset of buyers. So we're going to keep chasing their money rather than remembering who we're in business for. And in doing so, they have now spent too long hitching their wagon to adults that continue to get into middle age. And now we're headed, into whatever. And you look back and you go, oh, where'd the last 20 years for our business go? Oh, crap. We might be too far away from connecting with any of these kids now. What are we going to do? Do we even remember how to do that? And you just ask yourself, like, and I think I said this in a video one time, I can't remember, but I talked about how when our grandfathers were kids, Superman comics were for kids ages 5 to 12 or whatever it was. When they had kids in the 50s, comic books for Superman were still for ages 5 to 12. They didn't age up for, Then when that generation had kids in the 70s and early 80s, comic books about Superman were still ages 5 to 12. And then somewhere in the 90s, they were like, you know what? We got to just keep up with these teenage buyers. We're just going to keep aging the comic books up. Hey, you know what would be a great idea? Let's draw Batman and Catwoman bumping uglies on the rooftop of an apartment building in Gotham at night. That was like 2010 or 12 or whatever it was. In other words, they've jumped the shark. They've gone a bridge too far with this now. There's a what do you call that? A point of no return. There's a point of no return with this, and I think a lot of them have crossed it at this point. It's like, oh, how did we lose the plot? But they did.
I mean, but Batman is a great example because Batman it's not a kid's franchise anymore. Thanks a lot, Frank Miller. Well, even all the movies that are coming out. But I think we've got a number of super chats and comments to catch up on. Werewolf by Lunchtime, thank you very much. He says, nostalgia for me is my Nan's Sunday roast. I would like to see Hasbro replicate that. Yep. Jeremy Jernigan, thank you. He said, there's a compliment in there somewhere, Michael. I'll find it eventually. Yes, you are brilliantly weird, Jeremy Jernigan.
And also that does explain why he's trying to help make some of the best action figures we've seen in a long time. Because if you grew up with action figures that bad, no matter how much he thinks he loves them, his brain has been working on righting those wrongs ever since. He might love Dragonheart forever. You might, Jeremy, but you and I both know you're trying to make some of the best action figures available. Your brain is subconsciously trying to tell you that they weren't adequate. You know it.
Expanding universes, thank you. He says, I think most of the new IPs being created in the video game world, things like Halo appear to have lasting impact. Yeah, I would agree. My son's generation, I mean, we had video games back in the 80s, but it wasn't anywhere as immersive as what the video games are today. And but what Michael was talking about earlier on in this stream when I was asking about the properties and franchises of the last 20 years, Michael listed Minecraft, Pokemon, Fortnite. These are everything Michael listed is stuff that my son has gone through a year or 2 years of being a fan of. So, yeah. A World Made of Cardboard. Thank you for the super chat. It says, the nostalgia for toys I grew up with. I really played with my toys as the cartoons. I think maybe he means I rarely played with my toys as the cartoons. I made up my own stories where a Hoth Luke was Doctor Who or the AT-AT would fight my Godzilla. Exactly, and I that was one of the reasons I became so enraptured with Action Man, because he was a generic adventure man and he could become whatever I wanted. I could watch a Chuck Norris movie and then all of a sudden my Action Man could become that Chuck Norris character and I could live out a new version of Missing in Action, that kind of thing. So thank you, A World Made of Cardboard. Jim Largo, thank you. He said, Doctor Who had a great multi-generational resurgence in the early 2000s before the recent showrunner ran it into the ground. Yeah, I hadn't thought of Doctor Who, but again, it had a resurgence. It wasn't something new. Like Star Wars was new to us in the 70s and 80s. And I suppose this is well, actually, I'll see. I think there's some more super chats. We'll get through it. A World Made of Cardboard. Yeah, I thought that's what you meant. You never played with the toys like the cartoons. You would go off and do your own adventures with them or make them into completely different characters.
Alejandro, I'm sorry. Alejandro,
go ahead.
Look, I'm saying that the Comics Code Authority that made sure that comic books were multi-generationally for kids throughout the 30s through the 90s, all right? Those superheroes were written for children of a certain age. So no, they did not show sexual activity in those panels in an explicit way. And then suddenly, after the New 52, Batman and Catwoman were visibly in splash pages getting it on rooftops, okay? I don't understand why this is such a thing. You're making this like an issue about, well, you can't say that we can't have sex in comics. Not for children.
No.
Why is this such a hard concept?
And this is exactly what one of the reasons I wanted to sit down and have this discussion with you, because people hear words coming out of my mouth and your mouth, but they don't listen to what we're saying.
No.
I suppose at the crux of this whole kind of discussion is that if, be it a toy company or a movie studio, or whatever it is, if they are going to continue to pursue the nostalgia bait for absolutely everything, there won't be great characters and great stories for the next generation, because you're zeroing in on a target audience of 40 to 50-year-old people who, you know, were captured by these properties in the 80s, and now they want all of our disposable income. They're not putting any time, effort, and they're not taking risks. They're not taking risks at trying to introduce new stuff to children.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what Laser Pants is saying. They didn't show, but at the I don't know if he's directing that comment at us or people in the comments, but it's like, well, no, of course they didn't do that, but they never went that far in those comics to begin with. Like, in other words, even Tony, you get what I'm saying. Like, they were making it as overt as they could make it in a superhero book where they never felt the necessity to do anything like that before. I'm not a prude about comics aimed at adults. What I'm simply saying is they are now trying to make this mainstream Batman comics and superhero comics run forward with the 30-somethings and 40-somethings, where they used to be specifically reserved for kids ages 5 to 14, and anybody who was still collecting them as an adult that was still having fun with them, great. But it wasn't aimed at adults. It was aimed at giving kids something fun to read. Yeah.
I also, a lot of the time, it's not even necessary within these pop culture properties. I mean, all of a sudden, over the last couple of years, Disney started to feel the need to specify the sexuality of Star Wars characters. That was never even a part of what that story was about, but now this has to be. I didn't even see the point of it, and I'm not coming from that from a place of being. I'm the furthest thing from homophobic you'll ever find. A homophobic, racist, anything like that. That's just not me. I'm actually part of an organization at work where I'm part of what they call a drive committee, which is about inclusion and diversity in the workplace. And I'm known as an ally of the LGBTQ community, and have even spoken out at some of their rallies and things like that. I have no issue with anyone's gender preference, sexual preference, whatever it is. When did that need to even become a part of lightsabers and the Force?
Well, to me it's an odd thing, because I don't have a problem with characters throughout the course of telling a story having, boyfriends, girlfriends, partners of any kind, if that's the way that they're written. Peter Parker has Mary Jane, and then sometimes he's, him and Felicia Hardy, have a dalliance or whatever. And so that the same can be said for if they introduced a character of different sexual orientation. That's one thing or another, but it's the over indexing and the what's the word I'm looking for? The explicit nature of putting that kind of stuff in superhero comics. Like I just described, I wasn't describing aversion to or offense with some sort of same-sex relationship or an alternative relationship. I was referring to a traditional hetero relationship that we've known. And I was like, guess what? Taking it to this level in this book that's ridiculous. Like, and
it's jumping the shark. Yeah,
it's jumping the shark. And the same can be said for anything else. As far as hinging and hanging plots on that, it's the same idea. Same idea goes for kids entertainment, youth entertainment. Shouldn't hang plots on, how do I put this? It shouldn't hang plots on any type of fornication. It should, that's more of a, regardless of the sexual orientation of the two characters, it should be treated with more of a fairy tale kind of thing going on as part of the window dressing of the story. The stories traditionally should be adventure, and they should have the, what do you call it? The moral lessons, the stuff that goes on in like a Star Trek episode, where they have the conundrum of the problem, the challenge of the week, or in a comic book, it was the challenge of the month, whatever it is, to defeat the big bad. And everything else can be there, but it's like now all of a sudden they think that, well, we've got to appeal to adults. So we've got to talk about adult things, to the point that, as we know with these studios and everything, they push it to the point of prurient. And it's just like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a young child, this is beyond my own memories. I was that young. My mother told me this story that we used to have this book called Aesop's Fables, and the book version that we had in the house had all of Aesop's Fables in there with pictures and things like that. And apparently that was my favorite book because I was learning lessons from it. And my parents would read that to me so often, and I would want it read to me so often that before I actually learnt to read, they could show me the picture and I could recite that particular fable. So I couldn't actually read the physical words, but I could tell them the whole story and the moral of the story. And
sure,
they're the classic sort of tropes that we need to be putting into stories, but with new characters, new and exciting characters. It's again, I'm so grateful that my parents' generation didn't feel the need to have that. If there's no nostalgia, what's the point? Because even though I have a collection of Lone Ranger toys, I'm glad that I didn't just get stuck with Zorro, Tarzan, and Lone Ranger.
Yeah. Master Son's sitting here saying they were chasing the money since we are now the main income owners of the Times. And I would say, yes, that's what they're doing, Master Son, but they didn't do that with our parents' generation. And they didn't do that with our grandparents' generation. In other words, there was still a healthy industry to create entertainment for kids. And they prioritized that, knowing that parents who were the main income owners of the Times needed to spend a certain amount of money on their kids' entertainment. And now it's like they don't care. They're just like, nah, whatever.
Get him a Nerf gun.
Yeah. So
I think we have some super chats here. So Crash, thank you very much. He said, I still play with my toys, going to pass stuff down to my kids. My childhood nostalgic toys are now being made into 6-inch figure, not 12 or 3 3/4 inch.
Right.
Yep.
Right. You know, sorry, go ahead. Oh, well, Matt, yes, Matt.
I'm just going to, Thank you very much, Matt. Avenger78, he says, thank you for the super chat. He says, evening from Edinburgh. Get an iron brew for Michael and a pint for Tony. Glad to have you guys in the community. Feels like an intervention I needed. P.S. Royal Mail strike has my desert rat hostage. Oh no. Avenger78, did you get it from Toys-R-Us or from Valaverse? Because hopefully if it's Toys-R-Us, which means it's already within the UK, hopefully it's not held hostage for too long. So. And well off by lunchtime, thank you. He said, Asterix comics are still putting out pure fun adventure comics. They are fun and intelligent, and people of all ages can enjoy them.
There, right there. Boom. Boom.
Yeah, and one of the reasons people of all ages can enjoy them is, as you talked about with The Mandalorian, they're not reliant on the memories and feelings of how people felt about Luke Skywalker in 1983. When you're hinging everything on that, you're propping up your franchise on a house of cards, really. So I wanted to ask you, Michael, we'll just do this quick super chat from Keith Knight that came in. Thank you, Keith. He said, as kids, my older sister wanted my Action Man to be her Cindy's boyfriend. I was horrified. Action Man doesn't play with girls. When I saw my first Bond film, I was about 7 years old.
Yeah, it's true.
Funny you should say. When I was young, my Action Man didn't play with girls.
Mm-hmm.
When I was about 9, I think I was around 9 when I saw Rambo: First Blood Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister had a Hawaiian Barbie doll.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, Tony borrows the Hawaiian Barbie doll after watching Rambo 2 so that she can become Indigenous Agent Cobalt and Action Man can be Rambo.
I want to make one comment about some. I've seen some stuff in the chat and everything, nothing negative or anything. But before I forget, I would like to say one thing. I was talking with Melinda about this about a week or two ago. I'm working on a video right now. This is not a shameless plug for it, but it's just the context of where this all comes from. I'm working on a video about watching the Patterson cut of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mm-hmm. And it gets back to something that Melinda and I have talked about numerous times, and it's part of what's going to be in this video is people who aren't like you and I, we're not politically motivated in our entertainment. We just want a good story with good characters, right? I think it's the greatest disservice that you can do in this day and time as a movie studio or as a television broadcaster or as a comic book writer or whatever it is, or, you know, not so much with the toy industry. It's not as applicable to them, but in these other instances, I think the worst thing you can do is pull together a cast of amazingly talented, diverse actors and then put them in a shitty script. Because what you're doing is you're squandering that moment.
Mm-hmm.
What you're saying is, we want the optics, but we don't give a crap how it comes off. And we're not even thinking about the fact that there is a certain percentage of the population that will blame the crappiness of this project on the diversity of the cast. They'll go, see, this doesn't work. Look, this always makes a shitty movie. And it's like, well, no, that's not really why it's bad. It's bad because the writing is terrible. It's bad because they never thought this through. It's bad because all these producers in Hollywood, they make movies as if they're a kid just chomping on Cocoa Puffs while watching, Nickelodeon. They They don't think about anything. They're all J.J. Abrams in their own mind, and he's like that. He's like, oh, I don't know how to make anything. This will look cool. And so they end up with these crappy movies. And really what they've done is they've left these talented actors twisting in the wind, taking the blame for their failings. And they're not considering that. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because the main example of this is John Boyega's character in the sequel trilogy. He was the only character from Force Awakens that had a really interesting and compelling backstory from the first film. And from the moment the second act of that film started, it was clear they were going to do nothing with it. And they never did anything with it the rest of the trilogy. But he was this great character that had this really cool setup. And then they squandered it. And they just made him this ineffectual third wheel romantic rival for Daisy Ridley's affection. All of that is one of many examples of massive wasted opportunities. And it's all because the writing is shit. Like, anyway.
Yeah, I really know where you're going with this. It's the Reva character in the Obi-Wan show, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing against the actress as a person. It's not anything to do with skin color or anything like that.
Right.
When I mean, you and me get some quite abusive comments and messages on social media because there are just you'll never stop it. There are assholes out there in the world. You can't help it, and I'm sure there was a certain level of racist type criticism aimed at I can't remember her name, Moses something, but the actress who played Reva.
Mm-hmm.
I had a real issue with Ewan McGregor coming out and saying, you're no Star Wars fan, and yet if you're making racist comments, absolutely. But in the modern day, when these stars have Instagram accounts and they can just post a video like that sitting in their car and everyone sees it, it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. I said some critical things because it was a poorly written show.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did it not have anything unique to say, it actually undid the story that set it up in the first place. It actually it did a lot of damage to the Obi-Wan show.
Right.
That was my issue with the character, and now you've got the lead actor and producer of the show coming out on social media. Star Wars fans are toxic. Star Wars fans are racist. It's,
right, because a few people ruin it for everybody, and they go out and they say dumb stuff. And again, Master Son, I don't want to jump ahead in the super chats, but he is saying, they're putting more LGBTQ in media because there was no inclusion. That's absolutely true. There was no inclusion, and there should be, and there's nothing wrong with inclusion at all. And that's why I'm saying that also comes with a responsibility to give the best scripts possible, so that the moviegoers who go in there as a majority percentage come out thinking about what a great story it was, and not coming off going, that story was terrible. Let's blame the new people in the movie that we often don't see in these movies. That must be, and it's not the reason they're bad at all.
Nope.
But it's what a lot of people say. It's that they use that as the excuse, and it's like, no, the script was terrible. It's more imperative now than ever that the scripts are good and well thought out, not hinging on nostalgia, but on compelling characters with compelling stories, so that everybody who's involved in these films, whether they are a person of color or a person of a different sexual orientation, that all of their characters shine appropriately in their roles in the story for the viewer. That's what I'm saying.
Yep. All right. Here's a good example. I've heard you discuss this in many videos on a lot of live streams. You have very frequently said when a movie fails, or even the story just doesn't work for you, or certainly when you say a character doesn't work for you, it is very, very rarely the fault of the actor or actress playing the role.
Right.
It's the fault of the director or the story. Here's a hypothetical for you. I've been saying for years that I think the next James Bond should be Idris Elba. Unfortunately, I probably missed that boat. He's he's getting to an age now where, you know, if they want him to sign on for 4 films, he's going to age out of the role.
Right.
But let's say my wish had come true and I had got Idris Elba as the next James Bond. And then the first James Bond movie because, you know, James Bond movies can be very hit and miss.
Right.
And the first Idris Elba Bond movie that comes out, it's poorly written, poorly directed. Imagine the damage that does to inclusion and diversity in modern pop culture.
Right. Right. Because most people blame the actor. They'll be like, oh, see, it's garbage because Idris Elba's the Bond. You know, I had the same issue when the new Doctor Who season came out because Chris Chibnall is a terrible showrunner. He's a terrible writer. He was good on whatever shows that he did prior to this, but when they gave him Doctor Who, it was like, oh, this is not a good match, right? But Jodie Whittaker's taking all the blame. And it's like, because she's the one out front. So it's like, well, it's the showrunner. It's the writer and the director producers. It's not the performer. She's doing what she's told. You know, it's an unfortunate knee-jerk reflex of the entertainment consumer. I get flack, whatever. I don't care. I'm just going to say it. It's not like they can do anything they haven't already done. Death threat, calling me a rapist, like whatever. In the early 2000s, as a massive, massive Superman fan that I was, there was a Saturday Night Live where The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, was the celebrity guest. And he did a sketch where it was a comedy sketch where he was Clark Kent. And everybody, I guess part of the joke hinged on the fact that like he was so big that like his shirt was just half open and you could see the Superman, but nobody was picking up on the fact that he was Superman or whatever.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized, I was like, oh my God, he should be the next Superman. Now, this was back in 2004, something like that. But I was like, oh my God, he should be the next Superman. He would be amazing, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, similarly, after Capaldi, I really, really wanted Richard Ayoade to be the next Doctor Who.
Yeah.
You know, I thought he would have just been amazing. So it's not about, we have dream castings, not to reference the Sega console, but we have dream castings that we like to think about, but you got to get a good writer in there or else the whole thing is DOA.
Yeah.
So
we have a lot of super chats to catch up.
Go ahead.
James D, thank you very much. He said, love your channels. Got Tony's Valiverse fig. Love it. Awesome. What figure are you going to be, Michael? Perhaps a Michael Stan Solo exclusive.
Nope. I don't want to be a figure in Action Force at all. I would not be appropriate for that. So, and I don't want to be an action figure, period. So there you go.
Yep. This that's a challenging YouTube handle. Thank you for the super chat. It says Shout Factory bought out all the rights to Alf for some reason.
I wish them well and I hope they go with God. Yep.
Masterson 42, thank you for the super chat. He said they're putting more LGBTQ in media because previously there was no inclusion. I was a black kid growing up with little black heroes. I can't imagine how the LGBTQ community felt during the same time. A Real American Hero, I think, was excellent with cultural diversity, but not diversity when it comes to things like LGBTQ.
Right.
Yeah.
That was before, in many ways, that was before those issues in our society were allowed to come to light. Like they were very much in the dark back there.
Yep.
And as kids, I remember being completely unaware of those parts of our culture that were repressed. You know, they were so repressed. They weren't making my radar, especially in the American South. Like they were not a thing. And I
can imagine it's probably still a little bit difficult today.
Yeah. So in kids television, especially, those wouldn't have been addressed for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Anthony Whitehead, thank you very much. Says, hey, Tony and Michael. Sorry I missed you guys at Joe Fest in Valacon. Got my Desert Rat and it's fantastic. Keep charging forward, guys. Thank you, Anthony. Much appreciated. A World Made of Cardboard, thank you. He says, nostalgia or creepy? The Money Supermarket commercial with He-Man and Skeletor dancing to the song from Dirty Dancing.
A useless experience, as Harrison Ford said.
Yeah, there was. I think this might have been Money Supermarket as well. I'm not sure. There was a series of ads done where they did stop motion with vintage Action Man figures going around on the tank, and the amount of people is like, "Oh, have you seen that new commercial with the stop motion Action Man?" I'm like,
"Yeah,
great." Crash, thank you for the super chat. It says, if you say anything nowadays, you're going to catch crap. Yeah, me and Michael know that.
Yep. Very aware.
You can say grass is green and somebody will argue with you. Oh, 100% they will. 100% they will. And are we caught up or... Nope. Matthew Matson. Thank you for the super chat. He says, new comic book co by Eric July, Rippaverse, has raised $3 million in a week. He has 65 days left on the first issue campaign that will start shipping next month. Me, Bobby, and Ryan were actually started talking about this guy after the last 3 POA. We were having a bit of a chat afterwards. It's quite incredible what this guy Eric has actually been able to achieve. So,
wow.
Wolfhound, thank you for a very generous super chat. He says, got to spend some time with my daughter. Thank you for the honest discussion. You're welcome. We've only got a few more minutes left. So yeah, hopefully you haven't missed too much of the show. And Andrew Sabina says, he says he remembers that Saturday Night Live skit. The joke was The Rock thought he was keeping his secret identity, but everyone knew and just acted like they didn't.
That's what it was. But he was at that moment. I was like, God, I wish he would just be Superman. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've been going for about 80 minutes, and I don't want to monopolize your time because I want to eventually see your Obi-Wan video and things like that. But there was one thing I did want to discuss.
Okay.
Before we finished, and that is the soft reboot, the reboot, and then the complete revamp. So I mentioned it earlier. I think a really good example of a way to completely revamp a toy line, or it should be any kind of property. When Hasbro reintroduced G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero in 1982. Originally, G.I. Joe, we went from, military. It was literally soldier, sailor, pilot, marine. Then onto the adventure team. When it came back, new scale, mythology, characters. It was all brand new. It was a complete overhaul from top to bottom. In a world such as Star Wars, that one of the things, you take like the first Star Wars movie, one of the things that took people by surprise and they were so impressed by was the world building. Yes. And you could see how expansive the place was. Just them walking around the Death Star and those huge shafts going down. You're like, this is a gigantic place with thousands of people on it that we don't even see on camera.
Right.
And all of those 1,000 people would have their own story. And I always believed that Star Wars would be successful by going off and it totally new stories in different planets. Doesn't have to be tied to Skywalkers and all of that.
No.
So G.I. Joe in 1982 was a successful revamp. The Force Awakens, soft reboot.
Right.
Same plot, same story beats. So I think what I'm getting at is that you and I both very much feel that there is a place for nostalgic properties in our toy collections, in our entertainment media, movies, online TV shows, whatever it is. But there needs to be balance.
Yes.
At the moment, I feel like I'm drowning in an oversaturation of nostalgia, and I don't know what the next generation's going to watch, man. I really don't.
Nostalgia's going to fall in on itself eventually, like a rotting roof. It's going to just, there's Melinda and I were discussing the Obi-Wan thing a few days ago, and we were discussing it applies to nostalgia in general, but it very much applies to a lot of the reboot and or spin-off stuff that they try to do to keep the nostalgia going, right? Obi-Wan, this applies to Solo, Rogue One, all these kind of films where you already know what these characters are going to do next because those stories were made first. So there's no tension, right? There's no it's like, well, I know that Obi-Wan's going to make it through this, and I know Leia's going to make it through this. Oh, and I know that, they're going to get the plans to the Death Star. As fun as that movie was in places, it is a law of diminishing returns movie. I know that Han Solo's going to survive because he ends up in the next film. And I was joking with somebody the other day. I said, if they really wanted to throw the audience a curveball in Obi-Wan, for example, after all these other things we just mentioned, they should have just had Obi-Wan cut Darth Vader's head off at the end of the movie with no explanation, and then just have it roll credits. Because at least then everybody would be like, I didn't see that coming, which is exactly what you want. So let me take the Wayback Machine to 2015. They announced at Star Wars Celebration or something that there was going to be this movie called Rogue One. It might have been 2014. They were announcing this stuff a few years in advance. I grew up with the understanding that Rogue Squadron, that was the designation, Rogue Squadron, right? Luke had been the rogue leader during the Battle of Hoth, and then, it was a special squadron, and they had a whole series of books about the squadron. It was some of the best writing up until a certain point that was ever in Star Wars Expanded Universe, because it wasn't about the Skywalkers. It was still about the battle against the Empire that we were familiar with, but we didn't know any of the characters, and they were all human. In other words, when I say human, some of them might have been aliens, but they were all without the Force. All they had was their skill. All they had was their skill as soldiers and skill behind the stick with their fighter planes, their fighter starships. So the tension was real because you never knew who was going to survive. There was never any certainty who was going to get out of this. So when I saw the ad for the Rogue One movie and all they showed were just X-Wings in the distance for that first teaser, I thought, oh shit, this is going to be awesome. Like this is what we need for Star Wars right now. We need a movie that shows us the right things that everybody wants to see again. The stormtroopers, the Empire, the battle between the rebels, the dogfights and all that stuff. But it's going to be brand new characters who are all only as good as the fighter plane they're in. And that means we have no idea who's going to get out of it alive. This is what made those books so good. This movie's going to be great. And then eventually they revealed, oh, this movie, it's about trying to get the plans to the Death Star. And I went, oh, but we know they already got them.
Yeah.
Oh.
So then a few years later, I think probably about 2 years, they announced a Rogue Squadron movie being directed by, I can't remember, it was
Patty Jenkins. Yeah.
Patty Jenkins. But, as you spoke, expertly articulated in your Kathleen Kennedy Fire Hose of Fun video, we'll probably never see that.
Right. Creative differences, and now she's out, and yeah.
She's out? Yeah, there you go.
I mean, maybe she made a correcting statement, but there was a headline that said Rogue Squadron now, in what do you call it? Contention, because they don't know. It's all this nostalgia stuff is kind of eating itself. It's like, and the toy industry in many ways has the same problem now, because we've now got 7 or 8 licenses for Ninja Turtles alone, and they're all just making the same 4 turtles, just in their own slightly different versions. Yep. How many Storm Shadows and Snake Eyes do we need? They're now doing a Masters of the Universe Origins Filmation style He-Man. So they're bringing He-Man out for like the umpteenth time in that line. Then they've got the other 2 lines going concurrently. You've got G.I. Joe that has an Ultimates line. They've got a sort of like Mezco style line with another licensee. They've got the Reaction.
Oh, it is Mezco.
It is Mezco.
Yep.
Reaction line. They've got Classifieds. They've got Retro O-Ring Redux. And you're just going, okay, this is this on repeat too. So in many ways, nostalgia is just putting everything on repeat. And I worry that too many people our age are excited they're just as excited by the 51st Optimus Prime as they were by the 50th.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that ends.
And well, I'm very much the opposite. I'm getting very frustrated. So this was one of my free gifts from Hasbro in that very generous gift box they never should have sent me. Great figure. If I had some gripes, it's the fact that, you know, my Storm Shadow from the comics, he didn't have gloved hands.
Right.
Yesterday, San Diego Comic-Con, they're bringing this figure out with slightly different paint apps on the bow and quiver. And ungloved hands. Now, I can't complain. I didn't pay for this figure. But that kind of thing just frustrates me.
Sure.
These tiny little differences. Now, when you take the original G.I. Joe Real American Hero runs, at the action figure run, 82 to about 95, yes, we got several reissues of Snake Eyes and some really popular characters. Actually, I want to sit down and think about how many different versions of Snake Eyes we got in the original Real American Hero run. What, 4 or 5 maybe?
4 or 5, but there might have been 5, maybe 6 if there were multiple versions in Ninja Force, but that was about it. Yeah.
I mean, I can only really think of 4 off the top of my head.
Right. There were at least 5. There were at least 5 because Ninja Force at the tail end had 1 or 2. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We've had more than 5 Snake Eyes in G.I. Joe Classifieds already, but each year of G.I. Joe coming out, you know, some figures would carry over for maybe a year, but from 82 right for, you know, it's like getting into 89. Every year you're walking into the toy store, all new characters every year. It's not the same ones over and over and over again.
Right.
That's what kept me engaged in that toy line for so long and kept me buying it. Once I had my favorite version of Snake Eyes, when I saw a new version in the shop, I didn't want it.
Right.
I liked my Snake Eyes version 2. I'm a version 2 Snake Eyes guy.
Yeah.
I didn't like, you know, the blue top. I didn't like the one with the cross knives on his chest. That wasn't for me. I was trying to add new and interesting characters to the line. So, yeah.
I was the reason that I was a second version Snake Eyes. That was my very first Snake Eyes. Somehow we ended up with a version 1 Swivel Arm, and he was in good shape. I don't remember how we ended up with him, but my first Snake Eyes was version 2. And then the reason that version 3 did intrigue me a lot, though he never supplanted version 2 in my mind's eye, was because that was around the time that I was reading the comics. And Storm Shadow version 2 was in the comics at that time, and I loved that action figure, and it made me realize that the comics were tied to the toy line. So then I saw Snake Eyes get that outfit in the comic, and that's when I realized, oh crap, like that's why he looks that way now in the action figure line. So I ran out and got him for that reason. He was never as cool as version 2, but
and you have him displayed on the tomahawk on your flag like that because of that comic, yeah?
Yes, because that's where Scarlet got shot in the head by Baroness, and they're trying to airlift her out, and yeah. So
I'm going to pull this comment up here. It's directed at RetroBlasting, but I have something to say first. It's that RetroBlasting. Sorry to annoy you, but I forgot to ask you this. How does a franchise like TMNT and Transformers earn their right to change? I have a real issue with the way Amazing Bro has actually phrased his question here because Michael has not mentioned anything about these franchises having to earn any right. You are asking a question, but asking it in a way that is you're trying to back my friend Michael into a corner, and it's not very fair. We're not even talking about them having the right to change. What we are saying is that so many of these companies, corporations, movie studios are investing all of their time, energy, money, and resources into the same shit over and over again.
Yes, right.
So, Amazing Bro, sorry to annoy you, but I'm going to ask you a question. How does my son's generation earn the right to get some of their own pop culture properties to invest in?
Bingo. That is that. I was just gonna say that I don't want Amazing Bro to think that we didn't understand the intent of the question, but I think Tony was right to point out how you phrase a question can either make it lead or make it bleed. And in this case, just understand that like nobody here is saying that franchises don't earn the right to change. As a matter of fact, in my last video, I said Beast Wars and New Adventures of He-Man, even though mileage may vary for people on how good those are, at least those were obvious examples of them trying to take those characters and put them in brand new situations, right?
Yep.
Really change up the franchise. Whether they live or die is actually a matter of opinion. Some people believe Beast Wars was a huge success. And then they differentiate Beast Machines as the failure. But I would posit that it couldn't have been that big a success because we didn't get re-releases of any of those toys until just this past year. So unlike Optimus and everybody else. So anyway.
Well, similar to the Obi-Wan, before Obi-Wan show came out, when they first announced it and were talking about it, and I mentioned this on several 3POA episodes, Ryan and Bobby were really looking forward to it, and they and I admire the fact that they're more optimistic than I am. That potentially, when it I think a lot of that was to do with Ewan McGregor. They had a lot of faith in Ewan McGregor as an actor. I don't know about he was a producer on the show. I don't know what else he's produced. I'm not kind of that au fait with his career outside of acting. I respect their optimism. I sometimes wish I was a bit more optimistic. There are people in this world who say that the glass is half empty. There are people in the world who say the glass is half full. And I sit there and think it's urine in the glass.
This is piss. This is piss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, great. It's half full, but it's full of piss.
And that's the thing. Like, I review stuff all the time that's modern, that's nostalgia driven. Sometimes, like, I reviewed the Firestar Marvel Legends that came out, and I was very happy to get that. I don't mind nostalgia. I don't roll my eyes every time something nostalgic happens. But guess how hard we had to fight Hasbro over. I say fight. We had to constantly, for years, keep throwing out the name Firestar over and over and over and over and over again to get that figure to come out. And now that she has, guess what? Now all of a sudden my cries for a 3-pack have finally been heard. And now they just announced today an Amazing Friends figure 3-pack. So I'm going to have to, figure out there's a new Iceman in it or something and buy them all over again. But they don't listen until it's too late. And then when they finally do listen, they make it next to impossible for the people to get it. But my point in saying all this is nostalgia isn't bad as long as it's in its place. Yeah. I'm not asking them to bring back Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends for a new television show or anything like that. Or although I do think they wasted an opportunity with Tony Stark and the MCU giving Spider-Man all of his stuff. They could have done the Amazing Friends at the beginning of one of the movies, and I stand by that. And screw you, MCU, you missed out. But anyway, all that to say is that I think nostalgia has its place, but I think right now nostalgia has sucked a lot of the air out of the toy space on the toy aisles. It's too much. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I was, I was again very vocal about the Obi-Wan TV show because I was like, there are no stakes in the game. Obi-Wan can't die, Luke can't die. Why are they bringing back Vader? He can't die. It's another useless experience. Thank you for that, Harrison.
And the Inquisitors, which were created in Rebels, are the worst idea Disney ever came up with. And I quote General Tarkin, or I quote Governor Tarkin every time people say, why are the Inquisitors a bad idea? Let me quote Governor Tarkin real fast, then hold that thought, Tony. It's real simple. The Jedi are extinct. Their fire has gone out of the universe. You, my friend, are all that's left of their religion. Let me repeat that. You, my friend, are all that's left of their religion. They are anathema. Okay? Inquisitors, they break the whole thing. And now, Tony, please. Sorry.
Absolutely. And I had no interest in Obi-Wan going into it because there was going to be no stakes in the game.
Right.
Coming out, even I watched 4 episodes, and when I'm not watching any more of this shit. Because it was breaking so much of the original story that I have grown up loving.
Right.
You've got to work within the rules that's already established within that universe. But as I said, I was very vocal saying all that stuff. This has not stopped a large number of people on social media now that the show's come out. Social media comments, YouTube comments saying to me that, look at you now. Obi-Wan was awesome. How wrong were you? Like, no, I wasn't wrong because Obi-Wan didn't die. Luke didn't die. Vader didn't die. And I didn't think it was awesome. And
no, you want look. I'm gonna throw out a random thing. But to those of you that don't subscribe, I don't even subscribe to the channel, but I watch it so much it's in my recommended feed all the time. If that makes any sense. Oral Knots, the guy that did the Kylo Ren reacts videos for all the different Star Wars trailers there back in the day, he has started a series called it's instead of Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's Larry, but it's using the Obi-Wan Kenobi footage.
Yep.
Have you seen this? What he's done is okay, totally worth your time. He's taken all the footage from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, professionally cut it up and redubbed it into a totally different story about a guy who used to be called Obi-Wan, who's now in hiding, named Larry, who's trying to bring back dance fighting. And I know the whole thing sounds lit because it is. It is the most subversive, hilarious thing I've seen. They've got 2 episodes up right now. They're trying to do 6. It's the funniest shit you'll watch in this month. I was blown away by it, and you've got to watch Oral Knots Larry, because that is the one thing I've seen that takes all the work from Obi-Wan and turns it into something worth my damn time.
Yeah, I'm writing that down. So someone's put it in the chat so I know how to spell it.
Yeah.
That sounds like my cup of tea. That
does. I know that I'm literally telling people to go watch another YouTube channel besides ours, and they'll get sucked away and they'll never watch our stuff again. But I'm willing to take that chance so that they'll remember me as the guy that was like, you know what? He cut his own throat to entertain me, and I respect that.
So. Well, look, we've been going for an hour and 44 minutes. We're going to go through the last few super chats and then, some final thoughts, and we'll call it a day. So Tony Robles, thank you very much. He said, off topic, but since you brought up Action Man, Tony, thoughts on Action Man Battlefield Casualties commercials? I think they are darkly hilarious. I don't want to misquote myself here. For those people who aren't familiar with what Tony Robles is talking about, there was a series of about 3 or 4 spoof commercials made a number of years back where you had PTSD Action Man, Suicidal Action Man, all that kind of thing. I do believe that those commercials were made to bring awareness to veteran issues, and I believe that it was somehow linked with some kind of veteran support charity or whatever. I really hope that's the case. They're expertly done. Some people may be turned off by the type of humor. I'll tell you, veterans were not. It was very much veteran humor. Really, really well done, and an interesting thing to check out if you can. Matt Deckard, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, we still have Robotech, I think. The Canuck, thank you. He says, hail from Arkansas. Great to meet both of you at Valacon. Getting in here late, but we'll watch from the beginning. Hail to Scuba Pete as well. Thank you, Canuck. It was good to meet you too at Valacon. I nearly said Joe Fest then. Matt Deckard, he says, how do we get children's media out of the creative dark ages? Where would the money have to come from for these franchises to evolve and grow? I don't know as it's money. I think it's very challenging in a world now where you have YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels. Entertainment now is in these, like, not even bite-sized portions, 5-second videos, and I think that's a very dangerous concept. I watch, I don't know if I'm lucky my wife doesn't watch my show, but she watches lots of, TikTok and Instagram Reels, as does my son. And I sit there watching them going, what this looks like to me when you sit there on your phone and it's like 10-second video, 8-second video, 5-second video. I picture, I can't remember the character's name. Is it Alex DeLarge in A Clockwork Orange?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Where he's there for this this special treatment, and they've got him strapped in the chair. I'm seeing A Clockwork Orange. The only difference is they're strapping themselves into a chair, and they don't need something to keep their eyes open.
Yeah,
Gary. James Salzberg, thank you very much. He says, I'm pretty jaded when it comes to Hasbro. When you've been slapped a dozen times, it's hard to close your eyes hoping for a kiss. That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, very much so. Whoa, Lester San Jose, thank you for the very generous super chat. He says, thanks for all you've done, your service and your content. This conversation, one needing to be had. I needed to get a lot of this off my chest. So if we're all caught up with super chats, Michael, any final thoughts?
I think my final thought would be take an effort, or make an effort. Take the time and make the effort to learn about what you love beyond just emotions. In other words, if you love it that much, why do you refuse to think about it? Why do you run away from giving it some deeper thought? Why won't you twist that Rubik's Cube a little bit? Because it's that whole thing of you've encountered people who they get real defensive about their positions on things. They get real and whether it's their fandom, whatever it is, and you think to yourself, well, if you're that defensive about your position on this, it must not be a very strong position, because otherwise you'd have the confidence to not worry about someone's opposing opinion, right? So, same thing goes with your nostalgia loves or whatever it is. If you're confident in what you like, which I'd like to think I am, it's like I know what I like in Star Wars and I know what I like in these other franchises, G.I. Joe and such, then I'm not really worried about somebody else coming along and being like, your opinion's wrong and you suck. And I'm like, okay, go cry about it. I don't care, whatever. Yeah. So learn what you love. It can't hurt you. There's always value there.
Yeah. I was trying to be very careful the way I said it in my Sergeant Slaughter video from yesterday or this morning for a lot of you Americans. When I got to a point where I was saying, listen to what I'm saying. I'm not being critical of Sergeant Slaughter as a person, as a character, and I'm not being critical of G.I. Joe. I was being critical of Hasbro. Now, if you love G.I. Joe and you love Sergeant Slaughter, you should want them to give you the best possible product they can within that price bracket. but some people can't see beyond that. And I've loved Sergeant Slaughter and G.I. Joe since 1985. And if you wanted to defend it to the death, it's a very risky game to play, because the future of that franchise is not in your hands; it's in someone else's hands. So you're becoming a blind follower. I'm going to my final comments here. I don't even really know if this is nostalgia based, but it's relevant to the conversation. I won't single out this person's name. I'm not. It's a good person. It was just an odd interaction that I kind of had with them on social media this morning. So if this person's watching, I'm not annoyed with you or anything. I just want to use this as an example. This person was asking me if I've watched The Terminal List on Amazon Prime. And I said, I have watched it. It was okay. And they responded with, oh, tough critic. And I said, look, you're asking an ex-Special Forces soldier his thoughts on a TV show about Special Forces soldiers. Right. Of course, I'm going to be a really tough critic. And then he says, I can appreciate that, brother, but it is also just entertainment, not to be taken too seriously.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not taking it too seriously. That's why I thought it was okay.
Right. Yeah. To be... Go ahead.
It's in a... there's lots of, weaponry and tactics and stuff that are very accurate to the modern day Navy SEAL. But the story is clearly set in a high fantasy type setting, this high level conspiracy that goes all the way up to the levels of the government and all that kind of thing. But I like entertainment media about Special Forces as much as I do about Jedi and lightsabers. I love that kind of thing. That's why I think about it.
Yeah. Well, this is, I don't mean this as a tongue-in-cheek thing, because it's certainly not to diminish what you've just stated. And I'm not setting you up for a joke, but I think that's where my attitude comes through when it comes to people coming at me about my opinions about Star Wars, and they get mad about my take on the Star Wars series, where it is, because the amount of studying, and it was studying, even though I didn't intend it to be, it was all fun at the time in the early 90s and in the dark times when nobody else was doing anything about Star Wars. They were all going to see Batman and, Batman Forever and all that stuff. And I was there just reading all these Star Wars source books and stuff, and learning about, the AT-AT walkers were built at Kuat drive yards, and it's an Incom B/65C A2 X-Wing or whatever it's called. That's the designation of that class of starfighter. All that stuff. I found myself, I think, coming at some of their resistance or vitriol to me because they get mad about my opinions about Star Wars. I come back at them like, well, if there is such a thing as a Special Forces soldier in the history of Star Wars fandom, it's me. Like, I've literally been in this deep into the details, through the dark times, all this stuff. So I'm not saying you can't like it, Joe Rando 42. You can like it, but I'm going to have a very different perspective on this than you are. I don't just lollygag into a Star Wars story. I earned my place here, So
yeah, you just said lollygag, and that reminded me of the Iconicon meetup day. Yeah, we're not here to fuck spiders,
right?
But what you're saying, it's 100% on point. That's kind of what I was talking about with The Force Awakens, when all of a sudden it was like these guys just came out of the woodwork. When I'm now going to be a vintage Star Wars collector, and it's like me and Michael have been doing this since 1993. It's we've been in the trenches all this time, which is why I think after all these years, we don't get blinded by the feels. We've become a little bit.
Yeah, and Bobby Collins, I had that right, by the way. I don't know what that little emoji means. You guys got to be careful with these emojis, because it looks like you're taking the piss at me. It is T65C-A2 X-Wing. Like, I just looked it up. That's Luke Skywalker's class of X-Wing. T65C-A2. Yep. Booyaka.
And on that note, we'll call it a day. All right, folks. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll have a quick chat afterwards. But great turnout, great conversation, and this will be one of the few live streams that I'm actually going to go back and watch again, because this was a really fun time spent with my friend, but about what I think is a very important topic, as important as a topic about pop culture can be. You know, we're not discussing
T65C3, dude. No, it's T65C-A2. Sorry, I don't know where these people come up with their
Wikipedia, probably.
Yeah, well, guess what? I'm looking at the Wikipedia and it says T65C-A2. So
there you go.
Now tell me where the Y-wings were built, jackhole.